Thank you all for coming. I'm Matt Ryan, host of Moderated by Matt on YouTube. So thrilled to have here to talk about Terminallist Dark Wolf, Shogun, and as a bonus, we're going to spread some non-radioactive dust and light on Fallout. For looking at our guest's IMDb page, you'll see that he's directed episodes from amazing series like Westworld, Lost, Boys, Chuck. So let's welcome Director Fred Toye to the LAcomiccon stage.
Thank you.
So Fred, when you first started directing, did you just pick your shows based on how awesome they are and they can come to Comic-Con?
Not exactly. I picked whatever came through the door because I was an obsessed cinephile and loved storytelling, and I think that like people saw that I, kind of gravitated towards certain types of storytelling, and I think I got lucky and a lot of things came to me. So.
So you had an affinity for the genre?
I did, yes, very much so. Yeah, I've always been definitely like sci-fi sort of themed programming has always been kind of what I gravitated towards, and not to say that that's all I'm doing, but I do enjoy that very much just because of the mythology and also kind of the in-depth sort of soul-searching stories that are generally at the root of them.
But actually, the first thing we're going to talk about is Terminallist Dark Wolf, which is not sci-fi.
No.
Well, and that's the thing I actually really loved about the show, how grounded in reality it is. Mm-hmm. You guys seem to make a real effort to be true to combat.
Yes.
The actual, what goes on in war. But I think more importantly, capturing what goes on between soldiers.
Yeah.
And that was an important aspect. So what were your thoughts about trying to do that? You want to do the combat sequences real, you want to make the soldiers feel real, but you also have to make it cinematic.
100%. I think the thing that was an incredible advantage to both the Terminallist Season 1, which I worked on as well, and Dark Wolf, was that we had this incredible support team in the veteran community. There were 25 veterans behind the scenes and in front of the camera that were involved. Half of the episodes or more, 5 out of 7 of the episodes were written by veterans. And the entire community that sort of supports it in terms of like the authenticity team that's there are all veterans. So effectively the mission for us was to tell it from a completely authentic point of view. The writer of the novel of the original books is Jack Carr, who is a SEAL who served a number of tours. And so, and Dave DiGilio, our showrunner, Max Adams, these are all sort of like veterans who basically embraced the idea that the show would come from 100% authenticity. So everything we did was vetted through the lens of authenticity. Every sequence was talked through in terms of like, okay, this is the story we want to tell. How are we going to tell that story in the most effective way and still have it be completely real? So there was a boot camp, there's, for all the actors, everybody sort of training, all those weapons were real, obviously firing blanks. No visual effects on that part of it, the sounds of it, so like there's nothing like being in a space where there's like a 50 caliber weapon being fired next to your head. It's something that you can't describe. So everything that we did in the show, we really ran through that lens, which is very helpful, because what you can do like when you're having a creative conversation with a writer or an actor, there's always a tie break there. You know what I mean? Like if it's kind of like, so I want to do this, I think it'd be really creative, and the actor's like, I don't want to do that, or whatever, like you can literally be like, okay, well, this is what would actually happen, and then you both go in that direction. So I think that authenticity drove everything, and it shows on screen.
So then, but it sounded like to me that was all about character first. Mm-hmm. Like yes. You wanted to focus, before you got into the great battle scenes, which we're going to talk about,
yeah.
But you wanted to make it, because at your opening, I thought with Ben and Daran, the translator, was such a nice, warm relationship that obviously turns tragic. What were your thoughts of trying to establish that before we got into the battles?
So on that score, I think that my number one focus and my contribution to the project really was to bring a singular point of view, because I really felt as though, in the first season of Terminallist, the Ben Edwards character is a character who is sort of, it's not really clear, and also in the book, it's not really clear who he is, but he turns out to be kind of the final linchpin to the story. He's like the most important character. He's the best friend of James Reese, and he ultimately ends up betraying him, but in an incredibly subtle way. So the purpose of this series was to tell the story of Ben Edwards, who he is, and how as a SEAL, who's incredibly trained, who it's all about brotherhood and loyalty. How would he betray his friends in the end? So that's what Dark Wolf is about. It's the backstory of how a character who basically sort of operates under the same ethical scale, but ultimately just goes slightly awry. And so therefore, if you are 100% invested in the character of Ben, you will see the show and the storytelling through his point of view, and therefore you'll be that much more invested. So that was the number one goal for me.
That's what I liked, because I liked about the scene with the translator. You could just see it was genuine. He wanted to help him.
Yeah.
And tragic, of course, when he loses the leg. So one of the most intense action sequences was the sad thing when the translator is blowing up the base compared to Ben breaking into ISIS.
Yeah.
The stronghold. What was the process of doing such an intense action sequence?
Well, it's a lot of fun. I think that what for me, drawing upon is if you start, just as you sort of astutely pointed out, like if you come from character, it makes it a lot more straightforward. I think that if you look at an action piece, no matter what the scale of it is, from the point of view of this has got to blow up and I've got to do all this, you'll get lost in that, because we've seen, I think audiences today have seen so much explosive action that we've all as audiences have become numb to it. So to me, always action has to come from the point of view of the characters in which you have sort of anchored. So to me, when an action scene is 20 pages long and it's written with all these elaborate things going on, it's, to me, I just take the character and I just go a straight line right through it. What's happening to Ben? What's happening to Ben? Why is it happening to Ben? What's happening to Duran? Why is it happening to Duran? And that drives all of the decision making. So it's far less daunting when it's broken down in those elements. Of course, there's a lot of things to work out, logistics and vehicles and all that stuff. But as long as you're coming from this point of view of character, it becomes a lot less frightening. Especially because what you can do in the end is, let's say you don't have a lot of time to do some of the stuff that you planned. Like if you focus on the character elements, you have a scene. And if you don't, you don't.
Well, you know what? Why don't we take a look? One of the things I loved about that sequence is traditionally when you have an action sequence, there's a thought to go big, go explosions, go loud. I love the way you use silence, like the capture the war scene, escaping the ISIS, but at the same time with the translator getting into his head. What were your thoughts of directing that to kind of do the opposite? What would we expect?
Well, I think that for those who haven't seen it, the tragedy of the sequence is that Duran, who is the translator, has been targeted and coerced into blowing himself up in this base, and it's a very tragic story. And so the subtext of the scene is not the excitement and the action of the explosion, but the subtext of the scene is how tragic it is that he had to make this choice. So to me, the explosion, all of the things going around it didn't really matter. What mattered was what Duran was experiencing, because we knew him as a character. So I wanted to be in his head at that moment, and I wanted to feel the pain. And I think that showing a big explosion, even though you needed to show it, would have taken away a lot from, it would have been shocking, but it wouldn't have had the emotional impact that it did to play it in silence. So that was sort of the idea. And then also with the scenes that we did in Croatia, which is this sequence here, I wanted to mirror the emotional pain that Duran had to experience in order to do that together with Ben's. And so that's how we kind of put those sequences together.
And that the scene with the daughter and the blood also really affected me the most. It also sets up your character.
Yeah.
Like
where his loyalties are
and journeying down the dark side.
Yeah.
Which goes to the end, one of the most intense action sequences I've seen in a very long time. Tense. What do you want to talk about? The ending sequence, of course, is the big climax. And how do you want to tee up the clip?
So this is the end of the pilot, and effectively what's happened is there've been a lot of kind of political things that have gone on within the team to sort of keep the person who did the bombing, the person who actually set up Duran, to keep him protected because he's a CIA asset. And our team knows that he's a CIA asset, and therefore he's to be protected. So the idea is that they're going to go in on this mission, and they're going to capture him and take him in and expose him. And you'll see what Ben's choice is when that happens. Having seen the scene with Duran's children, which is what the girl that we flash to, and the son, this sequence hopefully will make sense.
Wow. Again, through character's eyes the whole time, the whole action sequence. So when we talked to building that, could you really start with an intense kind of storming, the compound? What was your approach to directing that part before we get to the dramatic?
I think the logistics of it were really cool because we did part of it in Hungary, part of it in Croatia, and part of it in California, all due to various logistical things. So kind of working out how all the pieces kind of go together was tricky and fun. It was a challenge to kind of blend all the different places that we did it. Because we had the set that we did when we ended up there, again, it was a lot of rehearsals, a lot of sort of going through with Jared, Max, and Ray, who are our consultants, amazing guys, and our cinematographer, who's David Stockton, who is incredibly talented. We walked through, weekends and nights and figured it all out. So that's how we kind of get through it.
Now, obviously, the most important moment of the series is when he executes the prisoner.
Yeah.
But saves the girl. So what were your thoughts on that? Because that really sets up everything. And I really had to pay that off very well, or the audience will not buy his transformation.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's basically his inciting incident for everything going forward. And I think that Taylor gave an incredible performance. And I think that I had the good fortune to be involved in his process. And we had lots of conversations. And I got a really great feeling that if I set up the scenario right, that he was going to deliver an incredible, powerful performance, and he did. So I got very lucky with that. We collaborated, we rehearsed, we sort of talked it through. Amazing actor. And so to me, it was about sort of putting the camera in the right place at the right time and living in that moment so that you understood clearly that there was a choice being made. Because I think that if it felt happenstance or if it felt like something like a triggered moment, it wouldn't have the same impact as seeing the character make a specific choice. And I think that was the intention.
And without establishing the relationship with the daughter earlier, we wouldn't have also bought him doing that in the first place. Because I thought their scene in the beginning, definitely when you watch the pilot, look at the first scene together with the girl, was amazing. And it's something I didn't expect. Great chemistry, and it was nice seeing it than typical. But now when we jump to season 2, there's a slight, I would say, genre shift.
It's episode 2.
Episode 2. Sorry, not season. Sorry. Episode 2. You've had a great intense war scenes. Now it seems to be a little more spy, James Bond. What was your thoughts going into it?
It was very exciting. I mean, so I had the good fortune to be able to direct the first 2 episodes and some others later. And the 2 episodes were so different. The purpose of the series, again, was to sort of delve into Ben's character and to understand what got him to the point where he would end up getting shot by Chris Pratt at the end of the Terminallist. And part of it was about the fact that he went to the sort of darker side of operations. He was, as a result of this event, he's kicked out of the SEALs. And on his way home is picked up by a CIA operative who is working in Europe who basically wants to hire them as hired guns. So effectively, he's given a new lease on life and is able to basically kind of like use his skills that he's learned as a SEAL, stay in government, doing covert operations. And so what's awesome about the beginning of Dark Wolf is that it starts in this sort of like period of time where we're going back to 2015 Mosul, where the U.S. got back involved in Iraq in order to train Iraqi special forces to fight against ISIS, and then very quickly shifts to this sort of spy thriller genre. So fun for me because I like kind of whiplash storytelling a little bit. I think it's fun. Working on Fallout certainly was something that I loved because there's a lot of whiplash storytelling in that show. And so the spy, and I'm also a huge Bond fan, so doing an episode that was basically sort of like had a spy thriller, I loved it.
You're also setting up the style for the series, the rest of the season, because again, it's a new James Bond thing. Well, if we're curious, we could take a look at a clip at the end where we wanted to compare the different climaxes, how you approach the action scenes in the climax scene. Slightly different. So I really started to me, the cinematography was amazing in that one. So you guys seem to, usually TV doesn't have that much time. You seem to have a little more time to set that up because it looked great.
David Stockton is our DP, and he did an incredible job. We shot that in Hungary and in a really cool place called Szentendre, and that was a museum. That church was a museum, and it was carefully planned. It was a lot of time to figure it out. And then after this, they wander around on the streets of this little town at nighttime. I think that specifically the nightclub in terms of lighting required a lot of rigging and a lot of work to get it ready. Yeah.
Also, you're moving in the streets.
Yeah.
So, what was the experience of kind of like going into European city, kind of going?
It was great.
Crazy.
Oh, fantastic. I mean, we had such support from the Hungarian crew, and in Budapest, and they were like, I think that one of the things that makes it different about filming there is that they work 10-hour days only. Like, you don't work a minute over, and you don't take lunch. So basically, like, it's a full throttle day all the time, and it means you really have to work hard and fast. But they're set up for that. So most crews in North America at least they work 12-hour days with a lunch. So you're 13, 14 hours plus your commute plus whatever prep time you have. So much longer days. So the shorter days makes for more humane filming environment, but it's also more efficient. So once, with a sort of a full throttle crew, we were able to kind of pull it off in the time that we had.
So now we're going to go to a new place, travel back to Japan.
Okay.
And this show actually has a lot of mythology, a lot of, it's a blood classic. What made you want to come aboard and tackle Shogun?
Oh, I was, actually the reason why is because my grandmother on my dad's side was a huge fan of the Clavel novel. And when I was a kid, she would talk about it all the time. And then they made that miniseries in 1980 with Richard Chamberlain that was incredibly popular. So I knew about it. And I had some friends who were putting it together, and I kind of got really lucky that they wanted me to be part of it. And I'm a huge, historical kind of epic fan, and I couldn't have been more excited to be involved in it and to learn the history. The book, the Shogun book by Clavel, if you haven't read it, is an easy read. It's long, it's 1,000 pages, but it's really, really, really fun to read. It's easy and great, and it's very pulpy. He was a screenwriter in the 50s, and so really wrote cinematically. So I think that I just knew that it would be a ripe kind of project to be able to put to screen.
You also had the challenge, we talked about terminallist, you also have to keep it really accurate.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got historical things, you got costumes, culture, language. What was you about to making sure that everything seemed authentic?
Fortunately, there was a huge team called the Shosha team that was set up in order to do that. And in the writing process, the writers had a consultant in Japan that they worked with that was a historical consultant. And he helped them sort of vet all of the accuracy on the writing level. But then in the filming process, we had this team of people, probably about 6 or 7 people, and everything was vetted through authenticity in terms of what they knew from that period of time. This was the Sengoku period, just before the Edo period, and there were things that were different between Sengoku and Edo. 1601 Japan was very different than 1620 Japan as a result of some of the events that happened in the story. And so we were really fortunate to be able to kind of like talk to people every day. So I could say, okay, America's going to walk in the room and she's going to stand there and she's going to say this. Nope, she can't do that because she has to take her shoes off and she has to stand over at that door. So a lot of that kind of stuff would go on every day. And again, it was like we always knew there was a tiebreaker, and that was what would really happen. So I think those conversations were very valuable. And we would have meetings ahead of time. I think I did more sort of pre-blocking of scenes on Shogun than I had done on anything before, meaning where I would stand in a lot of times if I'm doing a scene like an action scene like that, I'll be like, hey, it's going to be cool, it's going to do this and that. When you're staging something that's a historical drama that's that well vetted, when you're prepping, you're standing in the space and you're saying, he's going to exactly hold the T there, he's going to exactly walk to there, the sun is coming from this direction, so she's going to stand here. We mapped it out very extensively.
So it was a little more of a rehearsal process than you're accustomed to.
Well, for us as a crew, yes. We do. Sam McCurdy was our DP, an amazing, talented guy, and he won an Emmy for his photography on Shogun. And in our prep process, since I didn't have the actors for, because they're working at the same time. So it's like I got some rehearsal time with the actors because they were limited availability. But for my process, I would just have to map out every single scene ahead of time so that I knew that it was authentic and that when we were there actually filming it, that we weren't spending a lot of time negotiating about where people are standing or how much tea to drink.
Well, speaking of one scene, one of the most pivotal scenes from the story is when Lady Morocco Blackthorn and her not-so-great husband have a dinner
Yes.
together.
The dinner from hell.
The dinner from hell. We've all had that. I don't think we had like this, so why don't we take a look and talk about it on the other side. That was such an intense, great moment, culture clash, but setting up the characters. What was the process of working with the actors on that one?
Oh,
It was
it's
such an intimate
amazing.
scene.
Yeah, and I think I remember when I first started directing, scenes like this terrified me more than any action sequence because to me it's all about the tonality and it's all about the pacing, it's all about the performances. And so to me it was, obviously an exciting sequence, but wanting to get it exactly right in terms of, cadence and performance. So, this is a scene we did pre-rehearse a little bit. And everybody came. I think what surprised me, honestly, was that Moika, who played Fuji, was such a great sort of Greek chorus to the scene and brought so much inherent, comedy to it. And also that Cosmo, who played Blackthorn, really brought his A game in that scene. And I was really fortunate to be part of that. And but in terms of like the way the camera moves and where the camera is and things like that, it's very challenging to do that in a way that doesn't feel as though it's being over-directed in terms of the subtlety of it, because the camera needed to move when it needed to move, and I wanted the arrow moment to be something that was very signature because of what it represented for Mariko's character in terms of her relationship with her husband Bentaro, and I think it needed to be an anchored moment in the series where you saw the level of disrespect and what she had been experiencing in her lifetime as a person who'd been truly victimized by her family history. So that was the intention of that shot and that moment. But it was very challenging to do that scene.
That was, but you were also tasked with the episode Crimson Sky.
Yeah.
This one for, sorry, spoilers for people, it is Lady Mariko meets her fate.
Yeah.
Something she's actually been dreaming of in a lot of ways, like what her desired fate, but clearly struggles with it. What was your thoughts when you first read the script? How are you going to capture it? We'll get into a scene in a moment.
Okay, it was very, very exciting because I knew that a lot of, there was a choice being made that episode 9 of 10 was going to be the finale episode, that effectively like the penultimate episode was the episode that really sort of paid off the series, and that 10 which I also directed, would be effectively like a kind of a coda and a reflective episode. So 10, the finale is very much tonally a very different episode than 9. And so when I read 9 and I saw that all of the real kind of meaty story material had been jammed into that episode, it was a little daunting. Because there was an incredible subtlety by the way the story had been playing out, that to have that much intensity into one episode was cool, and so I was excited to take it on. A bunch of different styles and genres go on in that episode, but I, again, as we talked before, to me it was all about character, and I think that what you needed to know, or at least what I wanted to tell as a storyteller of that sequence, of that episode, is that Mariko, her feelings about death and sacrifice are untenable, and they're undefinable, and that in her performance you needed to feel her feelings, her emotions, and her intentions without actually putting a pin in exactly what those are. So there was a nebulous quality to the episode, even though it tells a lot of story material and it mirrors effectively her emotional experience, and that was a very sort of thin line to walk.
And you had to set it up in your previous episode we just watched, even 4+4, that because this is laying the groundwork for what we're about to see.
Yeah.
In this clip is one of the coolest scenes actually in the show. People her trying to escape the castle, and it just, if you want to watch it, the idea of her being confined is the worst tragic thing for her in the world. So we're going to take a look.
It's also, just to set it up, if anybody hasn't seen it, if she is able to leave, she will effectively politically break up all of the regent's control of Osaka, and it would basically allow Toranaga, who she is allied with, to basically get a wedge into it. It's a very subtle political point, but if she escapes, it's a huge deal.
So Lady Marco's character has been so confined and restrained through the whole entire series up to this point. How fun was it letting her loose?
Oh, it was amazing. It's fantastic. And Anna is such an amazing actor, and she really prepared. She was one of the most focused actors I've ever worked with. She was incredible, really amazing. And I think her training was really good. She trained for a long time with our stunt coordinator Lash on that style of fighting. It was all historically accurate to that character. Lady Grazia was also a fighter who her character was based on, and I was so impressed by her. She just did it. I mean, she just really gave it. And how could you not have that face, you know?
So she had fun.
She was
finally into it to kind of know.
She had a great time. Yeah, she was really good, and she was ready. So it's good.
But then the question is, tragic. I mean, the end for her. What's it like directing the episode, the follow-up episode? That's the ghost of her. Like, she's such a missing piece as an actress, as a character, as everything. How do you approach directing a show that has such an empty?
I'm sort of a sentimental guy, and so to me, sort of longing is an emotion I gravitate towards. So to me, her absence was very important to the storytelling of the finale, because I think that having her in the room at all times without her actually being there was a mood that I enjoyed very much. So it was challenging, but I think that the challenge of it was to have her be always present even though she was gone. And it was in the story and it was written in the script, but it was also to sort of have her presence in every scene by reminding the actors, by bringing that tonality, the music, et cetera, et cetera.
So you guys didn't consider a Game of Thrones thing where you resurrect her because, bring her back to life because
I think everybody wants that.
All right, we're going to switch gears a little. We've talked a lot about authenticity, action, genre. Now, I want to talk about one project you directed as a documentary. I, of course, referring to Fallout. As we know, the TV show Fallout what's it like coming aboard that video game show based on a video game that was beloved by fans, and what was it like jumping on board?
Great. I'm a huge fan of the game, and I'm a gamer, and I love to play, and so I just thought that the take that they had with it, that Graham and Geneva, the showrunners, the writers, and the writing team, and Jonah Nolan, who directed the pilot, the first few episodes, and is a producer, they had an incredible sort of great take on it. I mean, to me, it appeals to me in the sense that it's such a huge blend of genres in terms of like the comedy, the horror element, the sort of the irony of the show, the set pieces, which are crazy, and the fact that it takes the time to sort of like invest in absurdity. It's like it's not afraid to sort of like live in a set piece that is just ridiculous. And that's what I love about the show.
In your episode, there's great moments with Walter Coggins in the past. And also, one of my favorite moments is when he's in the bar, trapped, like the prisoner, but in control. What was the process of directing those two different kind of, tonally different?
It's fun.
Sorry, but especially the past sequence, because one of my director loves, the Walter Coggins scene. So what was the process of going back into the past?
Well, first of all, you have this, I mean, Walton is like a movie star in terms of like his looks and the way he presents. And I think he feels, just like you were talking about Mariko, he feels trapped in the ghoul. So when he gets to go back in the past and play Cooper Howard, he loves it. And so he's very invested, and Walton is like incredibly kind of prepared and dedicated. And so when you get a chance to sort of work those sequences through, he wants to know what's it going to look like, what are we going to have, like what kind of, what's the lighting going to be like, how are we going to, so I got a chance to walk him through almost always. And I did it in season 2 as well. Take him to the sets, show him what it all looks like, show him the production design. He's always excited about the production design. But if you look at his performances, and I think the reason why he's having such a wonderful moment right now with, between Righteous Gemstones and White Lotus and all of this happening at the same time for him, is that there's nobody that goes 150% like Walton. Like he just jumps in. And as a director, that's fantastic because to me it means he wants to play. He's not going to resist. He's just going to go for it. He's going to make choices. And so to me, when we were doing Cooper Howard as a movie star, and basically he's playing John Wayne effectively in the past, and to have him have that kind of gravitas and power, and especially for an actor like that, it was an easy target. And I also like the 50s as a time period of production design and vibe and tone and music, et cetera, so it's really fun.
And also you get to do a little alternative 50s too.
Yeah.
Like just kind of an alternate reality. But at the same time, then you had this great Old West Goulding, and you actually did Westworld, so you have to experience it. Well, it's like going back to the Old West a little and having fun with Walton, like, and doing those kind of bar scenes.
It's so great. It's really fun. I mean, I do find myself, because I'm such a fan of old movies, I do find myself like coming up, like designing a shot and going like, this is so original, and then I'll watch like The Good, Bad, and the Ugly, and I was like, oh, I just ripped that shot up. And I do it all the time. Like there's so many things that I have kind of drawn upon that are just now in the subconscious that I don't realize that I've like stolen from another movie. And so in Westerns, there's a lot of that because, I love Westerns, and having done Westworld, like there was a lot of sort of Western mythology, photography, and shot choices and scene choices, that I had gotten a chance to play with before. So I use them in Fallout.
But conversely, we've spoken a lot today about action, all these dramatic scenes. But you did comedy with Chuck, like going back to the original days. What was it like taking Ella into the vault and having some kind of fun and doing some actually a little more comedy and less action?
Well, I like that very much, and Ella is a team player, and she's great, and she's very funny. I mean, she's like her quirkiness, and her those big beautiful eyes, and it's so fun to put her in scenarios where she has to be this sort of very put together person in the midst of absurdity, and so it's great fun to do that, and I think as everybody says, comedy is the hardest thing to do. It's really about experimenting a little bit, about pushing. There was a lot of times where Graham and Geneva, both the showrunners, would be on set and they would be like, "Don't you want her to, just push it one," and it's always pushing a little bit. And then sometimes it's that most extreme version that ends up being the funniest one, and sometimes it's the first take and the actor's first instinct that's the funniest take, and you won't know till you start editing it together. Honestly, you can't know when you're shooting it. You think it's like, oh, that could be funny, and then try something and it's like, oh, that's terrible. And then you get it in the editing room, and it's like the funniest thing of all.
So is that something like as a lesson to directors that sometimes, for the other genres, you kind of know what your plan is, and comedy, I'd be a little more flexible.
Very flexible and very open to stuff that happens, because I mean, the jokes that we think of when we look back on John Hughes movies or whatever are these like absurd little moments that probably just happened. They just happened on set, and you're like, and it's now timeless. And those kind of comedy moments really oftentimes come out of nowhere.
Interesting you mentioned editor, because that was going to be my last question. Your origin story, you started as an editor. Yeah. You worked a lot on Alias. Yeah. I look at the thing. So how do you think that kind of helped you, become a director?
It helped a lot. I think it was everything. When I first started working, I was a production assistant, and I worked on set a lot, and I loved working on set. But I realized to learn editing, to learn directing and to learn storytelling, that editing would be good for me. And so I was an assistant film editor for a long time, and I got a chance to work with wonderful filmmakers as an assistant. I worked with John Frankenheimer, and I worked with Robert Zemeckis. I worked on Forrest Gump. I worked with Dee Dee Allen, who Marianne worked with as well. And so I got to watch old school editors really sort of work through editing, and when we were on film at that time, when we were doing the actual film process of cutting, it was more time consuming to make a cut. So I would watch the editors and talk through them. They would talk me through their choices, and I could see them going like, I don't think that shot's going to work. Let's go back and look at dailies of this. And so the thought process really played a big part in editing when you were editing on film. Today, because it's so quick and digital, and I edited digitally as well, you can make decisions so quickly. There's less thought that goes into it. So to me, it was the mechanics of the thought process in editing that I learned, that I brought to directing. That it's really the thought process. It's the creative thought process. It's not the execution that will sort of ultimately get you to a place where you want to be in terms of storytelling.
Cool. Well, sadly, that's all the time we have tonight. So let's thank Fred Toye for a great dissection of directing. Thank you.